Comment ça va?
Fine, hello.
Bien, good.
Sorry for
We're
the rain.
like the desert.
Yes.
Il commence.
Was it difficult technically to shoot the Desierto?
Wait, sorry? Was it difficult?
Technically to shoot the Desierto?
Yeah, I mean, when I started working on the movie, I didn't think much of logistics as a filmmaker. I just took my car and I went alone to find the deserts where I wanted to shoot, but then I brought the producer and he wanted to kill me because it was always like 2 hours in car and then we needed to carry equipment for another 30 minutes to get to where the locations were. So in that sense, the hardest part of shooting in the desert was getting there, and also it was always very hot, over 40 degrees, and there's snakes and everything. So yeah, probably next time I would prefer doing something in the Arctic or something colder.
How did you choose the cast?
And with Gael, I always knew I wanted to work with Gael. I knew I wanted to work with him for 3 reasons. One is that I knew in a movie with so little dialogues, you really need a great actor to connect with the audience. You know, and Gael is, as a Mexican actor, he's one of the actors I admire the most. I also wanted to work with him because when I was doing research about the theme of migration, I noticed Gael had done lots of documentaries on that subject matter, so I knew as an actor he was really informed on the subject matter. And also for me it was important to, in the character of Gael, to have a recognizable star. I wanted to, you know, I think a lot of the problem with how we approach migration is that politicians and the media always talk as the migrants as this other, this evil other, and so to me it was important to give the migrant a really recognizable face, kind of invert the way Hollywood films are, where normally you have a good American running away from evil foreigners. So I wanted to flip the things, and so for that it was important to have Gael. And Jeffrey he's an actor I really like. He really, when I met him, I knew he was gonna be able to create a scary character, but a character that was human. For me, with Sam, was important to, with the little dialogues that there is, to create a human monster, because I think that makes him more scary and more real.
And you spoke about the migrants. With the situation in...
Ça c'est Mateo, le scénariste, oui. Balance para
with the situation in Europe, with the migrant crisis and the progression of Donald Trump in the US, we feel like Desierto is becoming more and more relevant than it was in the first intention. How do you see the strong echo of the movie with the actuality?
Well, we started writing Desierto 7 or 8 years ago, and back then also migration was as relevant. I believe, you know, right now maybe the situation is escalating to a level where media is finally having to talk a lot about it. But I think why we chose to do a movie that has so little dialogues and its action is because we really believe that migration is not only an atemporal subject matter. I think it always is relevant. As humans, we've always been a migratory species. So in that sense, I think no matter when the movie came out, it was always going to be relevant. But also, it's a very universal subject matter. I think the movie happens in the border between Mexico and the US, but it also could have happened in the border between Mexico and Central America, or I mean, you see it here in Calais or...
Turkey.
So in that sense, you know, that was a little bit also the idea behind doing a movie so minimalist and with so little dialogue, that I believe in that sense an audience everywhere can connect with it, because I think it's a subject matter that is very relevant everywhere in the world.
From the beginning that you make hunting and survival movie, and what is interesting for you, both of you, in this genre?
Of survival? Yeah, I mean, since we started, we knew it was a story of survival, and I think what's the nicest thing about survival is that in a survival situation, it's when all humans are the same. You know, we all, no matter what our backstory is, we all want to survive. And I think that was a little bit the idea behind it, because I do think, again, that's the problem with how we view the phenomenon of migration, which is that cultures see the other, and I think what's important is to start being able to see this, that we all are humans, and we all, no matter where we come from, have the same instinct of survival. Tú puedes contestar, il parle français.
What was the question? C'est sur le genre?
La importancia del survival.
Ouais, finalement c'est un thème universel, je pense que tous les êtres humains doivent se connecter à la nécessité de survivre, soit dans la nature, soit face à un autre être humain. Et de nos jours, le conflit entre les êtres humains, je pense que c'est important à affronter, à survivre.
Which scene was the most difficult one to shoot and why?
All scenes were difficult because Gael and Jeffrey were almost always about to die. They did most of their stunts, so like in that sense, in retrospective, I was very lucky I didn't injure my actors. There was one time when the dog almost bit Jeffrey in the face, and I think that would have been expensive. But probably the two most difficult scenes were when the dog dies, because it was very complicated in visual effects. There I was really lucky to work with Anthony Lestremont here in France, who really helped me get that one. And the other one was when the first shooting scene, because to us it was very important to show the violence in a crude way. So it was a scene that we really worked many days on.
The car was complicated.
Oh yeah, and when the car flips, it wasn't complicated. That one was just like complicated for the guy driving. It was just like drive fast and.
Have you previously been confronted, you and/or your family, to any kind of discrimination in the USA?
Wait, sorry?
Sorry.
Tu peux le dire en français, s'il te plaît.
Est-ce qu'il a été déjà confronté à la discrimination?
Les États-Unis, moi? Not really. I mean, you know, when you travel with the green Mexican passport, they stop you a lot in the borders. But as soon as they find out that my dad directed Harry Potter, they let me in. So in that sense, I've always been a very privileged migrant. But the sad thing is that I'm a privileged migrant, but in the US, living in the US, I hang out with migrants that don't have the same opportunities, and you know, and their situation is horrible. You know, you see stories from women having to live in the US, but their kids are still in Mexico, to, you know, like fathers that like their families, and you know, it's to me this idea that like border is so arbitrary. You know, when we started looking for deserts, we traveled to the border, and sometimes you don't realize you cross the border because it's the same on each side of the border. It's just a desert.
What is your opinion about those people who want to cross the borders and those who protect the borders with their own methods? Did you meet people from both sides?
Have I met people from both sides? Yeah, you know, I mean, I think migration, part of the issue is that we see it as a problem and instead of a phenomenon, and I think it's more important try to understand why the phenomenon happens, which are the problems that are causing the phenomenon, because many times our problems that we've caused, is I think it's whether it's environmental or whether it's because of colonialism, and we've caused people to have to leave their home. No one wants to leave their home to come to Europe. It's not like the weather is that nice. People don't come to Europe for the weather. So in that sense, migration, I think it's a phenomenon that's natural. On the other side, Jeffrey represents a vigilante, but more than vigilante, what I wanted to talk about with Jeffrey was this rhetoric of hatred. I think in all countries you see this rhetoric of where media and politicians use migrants as an obvious scapegoat, and I think that's very dangerous. We've seen it in history in the last century, how when a person starts using a minority as a scapegoat, it leads to horrible places in history. So I think a little bit I wanted to show how that rhetoric with the wrong person, it can end up horrible.
There's something very amazing in your artistic direction. The movie takes place in the immense city of the desert, but very quickly we suffocate and we are in a closed space, but in open air. How did you think that dynamic in your direction?
Well, it was, like the idea since the script, it was to create a story by contrasting a character against the landscape. So when I started working with Damian Garcia, the cinematographer, it was the same challenge to be able to create a balance between the very wide shots where you see the landscape, because the landscape's is the most important character in the movie, but also to have really close shots, to really be close to the characters, and be able to create that contrast.
If I remember well, Jeffrey and Gael, they only share the same frame at the end with their duo. I think it's intentional, but why? What's the meaning for you? They separate them at the beginning and then reunite at the end.
Well, it was a long process. In the script sometimes we weren't even going to see Sam, he remained like this figure far away, but then we decided, we needed like the contrast of the bad guy, so we took those two characters and followed them until their paths crossed very naturally.
Because in a way, Desierto has many readings. It has the political, the genre, but we also always saw it as a story of archetypical survival. So to me, there was that story where Jeffrey is the monster of Gael, and Gael is running away from his monster until he makes his way up to the mountain, and finally that's where he turns around and throws himself with the monster. He finds that monster inside of himself and embraces it and throws himself. So in that sense, it was that journey of running away to confrontation. Working with Gael and Jeffrey, I was very careful. Gael and Jeffrey never met each other until that scene. Since they're always separate, I kept them in different hotels. They never met, so I would film one day with Gael, one day with Jeffrey, and they only met in that scene. And it was really nice because since they didn't really know each other, then when Gael started screaming at Jeffrey, it was all very honest and very real. I think it was nice.
Alongside your father for you, what's the one thing you learned from him that was really useful while shooting the Desierto?
Well, I think since we wrote that, since Desierto and Gravity are similar in the concept of tension and time, I think probably the main thing I learned from my dad that I always saw throughout the process of writing Gravity also and seeing him watch is this concept of rhythm. I think with tension you have to be very precise with the rhythm and the way you have tension and relief. So, since the script, you read Desierto and it felt as tense and stuff as the final as the movie is. So I think in this movie that's the main thing I learned, this idea of time and rhythm.
In your movie, Adonga, you show a romantic relationship between an American woman and a Mexican. Is it important for you to bind Mexico and the US?
Well, in Añoña, the American woman is my wife and the Mexican is my brother. So it was also partly personal, but you know, to me that story's always been personal since I grew up between Mexico and the US. You know, the relationship between both cultures and both languages and has always been very important. I mean, and as a Mexican, we are the backyard of the US, so it's always the relationship as a Mexican with the US is always going to be very important.
I would like to know how Jeffrey worked with the dog.
Part of why I like Jeffrey is when he arrived to the meeting, all the tattoos that you see in the movie are real. And when he arrived to the meeting, he had a tattoo of one dog, one of his dogs here and another dog here. And that's when, you know, when he arrived in his pickup truck and I was like, this guy is Sam. And then, yeah, it was great. You know, he started working with the dogs and he became best friends with the dog in the movie. So it was very easy at the end, like we didn't even need the animal handler. Jeffrey would just tell the dog what to do and he's a dog guy.
Desierto scratched the famous American dream. It was the first intention to bring back this myth among a very sad reality, as if the American dream was only an illusion.
Yeah, I mean, and that's where Mateo and I struggled a lot with the ending because since the script, we knew we needed to have, you know, the audience has been following Gael through this journey, so we needed Gael to arrive to the other side, to arrive to safety. But at the same time, we didn't want it to be a happy ending because the reality is once you arrive to the US or to Europe, the horror continues, you know. So it was finding a balance between
Saved and not saved.
There is a similarity with your and your father's. Again, sorry.
Yeah.
I think it's a very sensitive cinema, physical. We feel the pain and the tension. How did you create that, and how did you use the woodkit drums?
Yeah, I mean, Gravity and Desierto are similar because, you know, we wrote an early draft of Desierto and then I showed it to my dad and that made us want to write Gravity. So in that sense, concept-wise, they're similar. And in those movies, a way to create the tension, and we always knew was through music. So that's when I decided to start working with Joan Woodkid because, you know, since I was filming Desierto, I was listening to Boy Run Boy, one of his tracks, every day, and I really loved the contrast between the beauty of his music and the harshness, you know, Joan has that. So I knew that his sound was going to be perfect for the movie, and you know, and then it was a process of working with Joan for several months here in Paris, like finding the right sound to create this texture, because we wanted it to feel like a texture and not like a sport, you know. And it was really nice when we showed the movie in the US to a group audience. Many people, one person wrote something that like I showed to Joan that made me really happy, which said like, my heart was beating at the rhythm of the music, you know, and I think like that's something Joan did really nice, which is you don't really feel the music, but it really pushes you and pushes you.
Why Jeffrey Morgan?
I've always loved him as an actor. I felt that like he could give Sam a human face. He was one of the, you know, as an not that many American actors would be crazy to do that role. So, you know, Jeffrey was one that understood the theme and like was, you know, supported the movie, and And as I said, he arrived with the tattoos.
He was the perfect Sam.
He was Sam.
As a Mexican American, do you see the US as a land of freedom and of opportunities?
Well, I'm only Mexican, Franco-Mexican. I'm not Mexican-American, but no, I mean, and that's not true, and it's something I wanted to explore with Jeffrey, and which we did with the character of Sam in scenes that are not in the movies. You know, a lot of white people politicians end up using Mexicans as a scapegoat, is because, you know, in the U.S. it's not perhaps right now the land of opportunities and freedoms. In that sense, it's why the ending is not a happy ending, because even if you arrive there, it's still harsh. Like,
At the end of the movie, there is a long shot on the desert. So I would like to know if you thought to cut a few seconds before that long shot.
Like to cut when they're just going?
Yes, the two characters enter in the white desert. The scene is beautiful.
Oh, and
Yes.
the white shirt.
Yes, and
At some point, that's the thing. Here in France, you guys are very, you know, like when I was working in the movie, doing the edit, le montage here in France, and all the French are so cynical. They kept saying, "Just finish in that shot." So I tried it, but what happened is that, like, I'm Mexican, so I do have a little bit of a heart. So it was hard to just see Gael go into that desert and end the movie there. So. But yeah, French people want me to kill Gael, apparently.
not kill him, but just I don't know.
A lot why we chose that landscape to film that shot is because, to me, it looks like an ocean. You know, it's the character walking into this vast expanse, which to me was very symbolic of what the journey is migrants need to do, whether it is in the desert or in the Mediterranean Ocean, or, you know, it's always like this really harsh, empty space.
Maybe you want to finish the movie more closer on the character.
No, exactly, and with this sense of hope, like I do, the ending and the reality is harsh, but I believe that, like, and that's why I like this image of Gael carrying the girl, which is, even with the harshness and the confrontation, as a human, you're always gonna push and push and push. So I did, maybe I'm too hopeful. I wanted to have a little bit of hope.
I didn't feel any hope.
There is a lot of violence in the movie, and it's unscripted. You don't hide anything. Why are you doing that? And about one element of the dog. Aren't you afraid the American audience won't like your movie because
Of the dog?
yeah.
Well, with the violence, many people used to tell me, like, "Oh no, why don't you cut away before the gunshot?" You know?
Or you make them far away.
Far away. You know the time where Jeffrey kills the guy who just fell and he shoots him? That's my brother. And when my mom saw that in the movie, she like cried for the whole movie. She thinks I'm perverse for wanting to kill my brother like that. But to me, it was important to be respectful. I think, like, when you do a movie about violence, you need to show violence. Otherwise, it's like all these other movies where violence becomes cool and like nice gunshots and stuff, but like people don't really see the consequences. So we wanted to be responsible. And with the dog, since we wrote it, our grandma, she's Franco-Mexican, but like
She loves animals.
she loves animals, and she read it, and she was more upset about the dog than about the Mexicans. And you see that also in the U.S. When the trailer came out in the U.S., many people said like, "Oh, I hope you know, people were really upset about the idea of the dog dying, and you see all these Mexicans dying. So to me, that was like, how can you care more about a dog that's been killing Mexicans than about the Mexicans?
That's interesting on the moral book.
Yeah, completely.
About the duel in the Calibre of the Mountain. A young director like him, is your young director, this is your second movie. I think it needs some courage. A long scene like that. It's really long. Did you have some doubts about this?
I always, you know, like, when I first gave the scene to Johan, and I was like, okay, will you create the music for this scene? We really wanted to create almost this spiritual music, is when Johan played with the bells to create this idea of almost an existential moment. And I sent the scene to Johan, and Johan was like, are you kidding me? This is gonna be the longest song. It's like 6 minutes. But to me it was very important to not cut it. I really wanted the audience to almost, and Johan really helped with the music, to almost go into a trance, kind of like go up into a metaphorical mountain, and you know, and go into a trance to feel the wear, the tiredness. So I think that's one of my favorite moments. That will. But yeah, it's
I think it's kind of difficult to achieve that and to make it work.
I think.
Did your father give you some advice to direct the movie?
Yeah, I mean, I always ask him for advice. His main advice was don't work with a dog. He kept saying don't. But like writers, you know, writers always like think it's gonna be easy, so they write it. But I was very lucky to find an amazing animal handler in Mexico, and you know, in a way, it was easier working with the dogs than with the actors.
And speaking the genre, Desierto is survival, and it's also like a violent western and a political movie. Can we say you made like a political western spaghetti?
Actually, after we wrote it, I went to Malaga, where Sergio Leone filmed in Spain. We thought about filming it in Malaga, where Sergio Leone did all of his movies, because, you know, like, we had many reference for that kind of movie. And then I found better landscapes in Mexico, but yeah, obviously always the idea was to do a redux, a modern western, you know.
Are you allowed to talk about your next movie, Zorro?
Right now we're just starting to write, so if I say anything it's gonna sound stupid. You know, like, it's easy to talk when you've done the movie. Before it's hard.
Just will you keep that approach, that kind of harsh and sensitive?
I think, yeah, I mean, I think what we like doing in the movies and stuff is always create an approach where through the genre you can talk about bigger issues, you know. I think something really nice about genre, and that's what I admire about Hollywood cinema from the 70s, is that under the mask of genre they were able to do very political, very movies that were very risky, and I think that's something that I like to explore.
Do you think the side entertaining of the genre is a good vehicle for express political ideas?
Yeah, I think so, because you can reach an audience that is not used to talking about this stuff. You know, you can make, you know, we didn't want to make a movie that people that are used to talking about this would want to see. We really wanted to make a movie that, like, you know, that like the rest of the audience would go see, because, you know, then you can see Desierto and not think about politics. You can just see it and like root for Gael, or if you're crazy, root for Jeffrey, and like just, you know, enjoy the movie as a pure genre. And then the idea is that through genre, people subconsciously you start bringing up the themes.
Now are you more excited about writing?
I think they're all part of the same, you know. That's why I also like to edit, because it's always, you know, you first write the script and you rewrite it way too many times, and then you rewrite it when you're in the set by, like, you know, working with the actors, and then when you edit it's your final chance to, like, write and make the story together. So in that sense, you know, I started doing this when I did Año Uña just because I wanted to tell stories, and cinema was an easy way. So in that sense, yeah, I guess writing is the first step.
I read you wrote Desierto, and Desierto inspired Gravity. It's a survival in the desert and survival in space.
Yeah.
That's correct?
Yeah. I mean, inspired in the sense that, like, when I showed my dad the script, that night he read it and we started talking about movies that him and I really like, that are like Desierto. We talked about Duel by Spielberg, Runaway Train by Konchalovsky, even in a very different genre because it's not a genre movie, Comme Non Mort S'Échapper by Bresson, which are very minimalist movies that with almost no dialogue end up managing to talk about many things, you know, in a metaphorical, in a cinematic way. Because, like, what interests me and my dad about this approach is that it's cinema at its purest, you know. You don't rely on dialogues. It's not you know, you rely on visual and on action, you know. So that's more, you know, the stories are very different. It was more the approach and the type of cinema that is cinema.
La dernière question. Vous avez fini? C'était la fin? Ah bah c'est parfait.